Hello everyone, I'm Eric Rain and today I wanna rank all the permanent passive bonuses you can get in Baldurs Gate 3. We'll go through every one of them and discuss how to obtain them. Quick side note, in this video I didn't include buffs that are exclusive to origin characters, since most players don't play them. I also didn't include spells. As you can see, here's my tier list template. In S tier, I'll place all the passive bonuses that are so good, I recommend picking them up in virtually every playthrough. A tier is for strong bonuses that I also recommend getting, but which aren't quite as essential. B tier is for more niche bonuses. They can be useful but only in specific situations. D tier is reserved for passive effects that are so bad they often do more harm than good. C tier is for effects that aren't necessarily bad, but I can hardly think of a situation where they would actually be useful. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. We'll start with the permanent bonuses from Act 1, but as always I'll leave timestamps in the description so you can easily find a specific effect on which you want to hear my opinion. Probably the very first permanent buff you'll come across is called Paid the Price. You get it if you accept Auntie Ethel's offer to remove the illithid tadpole from your brain. Of course, she won't actually cure you. Instead, you'll receive this unique permanent effect. The buff grants you a +1 bonus to intimidation checks, but gives you disadvantage on perception checks. You'll also have disadvantage on attack rolls against hacks. This is probably the worst so-called buff in the entire game. Not only is a +1 bonus to intimidation checks extremely minor, but the drawbacks are far more impactful. Disadvantage on perception checks can ruin certain dialogues, and it also makes exploration harder, since perception is used to spot traps, hidden objects, and potential ambushes. The disadvantage against hacks is also annoying, because you'll have to fight Auntie Ethel twice during a normal playthrough, and skipping those encounters isn't really an option, considering how good the rewards are in both Act 1 and Act 3. The only remotely decent reason to get this buff is if you like the unique eye appearance that comes with it. Otherwise, don't take the deal. Paid the Price is D tier, as you might have guessed. Since we're already talking about the hag, let's move on to the next permanent bonus related to her. When you reduce Ethel to around 20% health during battle, she'll offer you a deal. She gets to live, and in return you receive a permanent +1 increase to any ability score of your choice. This is an insanely powerful bonus, because it allows you to reach 18 in a stat without spending a feat. That's especially useful for builds that don't have spare feats to invest in ability score improvements, such as many Warlock or Paladin multi-class builds. So yeah, this is an easy S tier bonus that I recommend getting in every single playthrough. The next permanent bonus on the list is Brand of the Absolute. You get it by talking to the god in the Goblin camp. Having the brand grants you a few unique dialogue options with certain NPCs, and it also allows the branded character to use these 5 items to their full potential, though the only reason you might want the brand is for the gloves, which are decent in Act 1. Though the problem is that Baldur's Gate 3 has so many strong glove options that you'll probably replace them fairly quickly. The ring can be useful for reverberation builds and weapons like Nerluna, but as of hotfix 36 of patch 8, it works regardless of whether you have the brand or not. So yeah, Brand of the Absolute goes into C tier. Volo's Esatz eye is the permanent bonus you receive if you undergo Volo's surgery. After completely destroying your eye, he'll offer you a replacement that slightly changes your appearance and grants you a passive ability that lets you see invisible creatures if they fail a dexterity saving throw. The problem with this passive buff is that there are very few encounters in the game where invisibility is actually a major issue, and even when enemies do turn invisible, there are plenty of other ways to deal with it, whether that's using a spell, drinking a potion, or simply hitting the area with an AoE attack. So yeah, honestly, there's very little reason to get this buff unless you really like the cosmetic change. I would put this in C tier as well, though slightly below Brand of the Absolute, since the Gloves of Power can actually be quite useful early on, while the Ice passive effect rarely matters at all. If you pass at least one of 2 performance checks while helping Elvira with her song in the Emerald Grove, you'll gain instrument proficiency, which allows you to play musical instruments. In my last video, I talked about a few tricks that make use of musical performances, so I'd say this can actually be pretty useful, although it's still somewhat niche. Of course, you can also gain the ability to perform by playing a bard or taking the performer feat, but not every party includes a bard, and most players probably don't want to spend a feat just to play instruments. That's why I'm putting this bonus in B tier. Loviatar's Love is a passive bonus you receive by completing Obdidark's dialogue event in Goblin Camp. To get it, you need to endure being hit 3 times without using the monk dialogue options or succeeding the constitution saving throws that allows you to avoid the pain. The buff grants you +2 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws, if the character is at 30% hit points or lower. The effect sounds strong, but the problem is that 30% health isn't much. On higher difficulties, a character sitting at that amount of HP is often only 1 turn away from death, meaning you'll rarely get much value out of this bonus. That's why I am placing it near the top of B tier. It's not a bad buff by any means, but unlike some of the stronger permanent bonuses in the game, it simply won't come up very often. Also, don't forget that this is one of the few permanent bonuses that can actually be lost if the character dies, so keep that in mind. Forbidden Knowledge is a passive effect you gain after reading all 3 pages of Necromancy of Thay. It grants you +1 bonus to wisdom saving throws and wisdom ability checks. At first glance, that might not sound particularly impressive, but the thing is that most of the nasty debuffs enemies can throw at you during combat require wisdom saving throws. I'm talking about spells like Hold Person, Dominate Person, Charm, Crown of Madness, and many others. So while this passive effect might look underwhelming at first, it's actually quite useful. Unlike the previous buff, it works unconditionally and is always active. That's why I'm placing it in A tier. BOOOAL'S Benediction is a permanent buff that your entire party can receive in the Festering Cove. The intended way to obtain it is by sacrificing one of your companions, but alternatively you can pickpocket the Sickle of Ball from Poldrip, then talk to the Red Cap and receive the buff without sacrificing anyone. As I mentioned, every party member present will receive the effect. It grants advantage on attack rolls against bleeding targets. This can be extremely useful because many weapons have an action that inflicts bleeding by default, and there are also plenty items and abilities that can make enemies bleed. It's actually quite uncommon to build a party that cannot apply the condition at all. In my opinion, this is an A tier buff. I can't quite justify putting it in S tier, simply because there are situations where it does absolutely nothing. For example, if you're doing a solo run without any bleeding effects, or if your party composition doesn't really benefit from additional advantage on attack rolls. Both of those situations are uncommon, but they do exist. Awakened is the next passive bonus on the list. You get it by passing all 3 saving throws in the Zaytisk found in the Githyanki Crash. This passive allows you to use illithid powers as a bonus action instead of a regular action. That may not sound like a huge deal at first, but some illithid powers are incredibly strong. Take Mind Blast for example. It deals significant damage in an area and can stun multiple enemies at once. Being able to cast something like that using only a bonus action is incredibly powerful. The value of this passive becomes even more apparent if you decide to undergo partial Ceramorphosis later in the game. The only problem is that not everyone uses illithid powers during their playthroughs. Some players avoid them entirely. Because of that, this passive can either be one of the strongest bonuses in the game or completely useless, depending on your playstyle. That's why I'm putting it in A tier. However, if you regularly make use of illithid powers, then this is absolutely S tier. Now let's move on to Act 2. The potion of everlasting vigor is given to you by Araja Blodra if you convince Astorian to bite her. Astorian definitely will not appreciate it, but in return you'll receive a potion that grants you a permanent +2 bonus to strength. A permanent +2 strength increase sounds amazing, but there's one big problem. In my experience, strength-based builds rarely need additional help reaching high strength scores. Early in the game you have access to strength elixirs whenever you need them. If you play a fighter, you'll usually have enough feats to reach 20 strength naturally. In Act 3, you can simply equip the gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength, and even in Act 1, there's the Club of Hill Giant Strength. You could argue that paladins benefit more from this because they don't always have spare feats and often prefer using other elixirs instead of strength elixirs. But honestly, I don't think that building a paladin around strength is the optimal approach in the first place. Personally, I'd much rather focus on charisma instead. By the way, in my next video I'll be showing what I believe is the strongest paladin build I've ever created, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. But yeah, I think the potion of everlasting vigor is a little overrated by many players, which is why I'm placing it in A tier. Githzerai Mind Barrier is a passive effect you can obtain in the Mind Flare colony near the end of Act 2 by inserting the Walking Mind into the brain linking device. If you choose to either purge or consume the mind, you'll receive the passive effect. The bonus grants advantage on intelligence saving throws. The effect disappears when the character dies, although that's most likely a bug. But it doesn't really matter because intelligence saving throws are incredibly rare in Baldurs Gate 3. There are a few abilities that use them, but most of those come from Mind Flayers, and there simply aren't that many Mind Flayer encounters in the game. So yeah, this buff isn't worth much, so it's going straight into C tier. If you agree to perform with Alfira for children at the end of Act 2 in Moonrise Towers, you'll receive improved Bardic Inspiration, which grants a character a 1d12 bonus to their next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw once per long rest. Even though you need to be a bard to get this unique ability, it doesn't disappear if you respec afterwards. In other words, you essentially can get it for free. Just respect your character, get the unique action, and respect back to your original build. Better yet, you can do it for every character, meaning you can utilize this action multiple times before a long rest. This bonus can be incredibly useful in Act 3, where some dialogue checks become absolutely ridiculous. Because of that, I'm putting it in A tier. Now let's move on to Act 3. One of the first permanent buffs you'll likely come across there is called Sweetstone Features. It effectively gives one of your characters a permanent bless, granting 1d4 to attack rolls and saving throws, which is very useful on every single build. To obtain it, you'll need to pay 5,000 gold to Boney at the Circus of the Last Days, so he can create a personal statue of your character. Now, there is a build that can effectively grant bless to your entire party at the start of every fight, but not everyone uses it. Because of that, I don't think that it would be fair to place this buff anywhere other than S tier, even if it's toward the lower end of the tier. Anointed in Splendour is a passive effect you receive after donating gold or items to one of the deities in the Stormshore Tabernacle. The amount required depends on both your level and difficulty. For example, on Honor mode at level 11, you'll need to donate roughly 5,000 gold per character. That may sound expensive, but honestly, I think it's absolutely worth it. This passive grants +2 to all saving throws, which is an incredible bonus to have for every character in your party. Also, keep in mind that donating items is much more efficient than donating gold. When you donate an item to a deity, the game uses its full value rather than the reduced amount you'd get from a vendor. This effect is an easy S tier for me. After rescuing Volo in Act 3 and speaking to him at camp, he'll give you a book called Regarding the Slayer. Reading the book grants every member of your party a passive effect called Slayer Knowledge. This bonus gives you advantage against various Slayer abilities during the fight against Orin. In practice, that means you're less likely to become frightened, prone, or suffer from bleeding during that fight. The thing is, well, this is technically a useful bonus. It only affects a single encounter in the entire game, and personally I don't even consider Orin one of the hardest boss fights in the Act 3. Even with fairly average builds, most players shouldn't have much trouble defeating her. Because of that, I'll place this buff in C tier. That said, if someone wanted to put it in B tier, I'll probably would not argue with them. The Tharchiate Codex Blessing is a passive effect you gain after reading the legendary Tharchiate Codex, which can be found in the Vault of Sorcerer's Sundries. After removing the curse you receive from reading the book, you gain a permanent effect that grants 20 temporary hit points after every long rest. This bonus is especially valuable for wizards and sorcerers, since their health scaling isn't particularly impressive. It's a shame that only one character can receive this buff, but even so, this is easily S tier. And finally, let's talk about the last permanent bonus in the game, which comes from the Mirror of Loss found in the House of Grief. This is arguably the strongest permanent buff available in Baldurs Gate 3. The mirror can grant you +2 to any ability score and potentially an additional +1 charisma. The process is a little complicated, so let me explain how it works. First, you'll need to pass the arcane check to understand how the mirror works. After that, you can begin offering memories to the mirror in exchange for possible rewards. The best part is that any ability score penalties you receive can later be removed, while the bonuses themselves remain permanent. If you start sacrificing memories before praying, you won't be able to receive +2 bonus immediately. However, you'll have a chance to gain the +1 charisma reward, and that chance increases with each memory you give up. Once you pray, you'll be eligible for the +2 ability score bonus, but you won't be able to continue sacrificing additional memories afterwards. There's also one important detail many players don't know. If you sacrifice every available memory, you can actually lock yourself out of +2 bonus entirely. So if you're trying to maximize your rewards, here's what I recommend. Sacrifice 4 memories first without praying. Then pray at the shrine and go for the +2 ability score reward. Doing it this way gives you roughly a 60% chance of receiving both +2 to any ability score and +1 charisma. Of course, you can always save scum if that's your thing. And don't forget that every companion can use the Mirror of Loss, though it's often worth respecting your character beforehand so they can easily pass the religion check, because without that you cannot get the +2 bonus. Yeah, needless to say that this bonus is an easy S tier. Honestly, I don't think that requires much further explanation. But I think that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future Baldur's Gate 3 content, and I'll see you in the next one.